Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Had a story sent to me by several people, including Michael, and it caught my attention because I had a similar case a few years back in my office I've spoken about before. So this is familiar territory for me, at least hearing some of these facts. This is from thedrive.com. Ferrari dealer tried to cover up customers' $240,000 458 Spider crash, according to a lawsuit. The San Antonio dealer is accused of pressuring a customer into selling their car before admitting it had been crashed. So Rob Stumpf wrote the article for thedrive.com. It's been widely reported also in the San Antonio Express News. But a Texas businessman says that he dropped off his 458 Spider on consignment with a local Ferrari dealership so that they would sell it and they would get a fee for doing that. And that, they would do their job, which is sell the car. The allegation is that a dealership employee crashed and totaled the car and then didn't tell him exactly what had happened, but then tried to tell him they were selling the car, but would he take a lower price for it? So there's some stuff going on there. But the couple, it's a couple who dropped the car off, are suing a Ferrari dealership, like I said, in San Antonio, for totaling the Ferrari 458 Spider and then not disclosing that is in fact what happened. So here's how it goes on. Here's what happens. First of all, the 458 Spider was white, which I know I'm a snob to make fun of somebody getting a Ferrari not in that color, but they dropped the car off on consignment, and they said that we're willing to sell the car for $240,000. So things like this take time. So the car sat at the dealership for several months, and they were sitting around waiting for the news that the car might sell. On November 26th, the dealer reached out to the couple and told them that somebody had offered to purchase the vehicle, but for $220,000, $220,000. The couple said, that's not quite what we're looking for. We're looking for $240,000. So while they were going back and forth on this, in the lawsuit, the couple says they were continually pressured by the dealership over the next few days to accept that low offer. The couple did accept an offer later that month, but that's when they discovered the client looking to buy the car was actually the dealership. So the dealership said, we've got a buyer for you. But actually the buyer was them. And the allegation is the reason they wanted to buy the car is because they'd already wrecked it. Now, these are the kinds of things you think you might want to know if you're going to sell a car to somebody. Who's actually buying it and whether the car has been totaled by somebody. On November 29th, the dealership sent paperwork to the couple. And the couple's lawyer alleges that within the next hour, the dealership revealed that the car had in fact been wrecked 4 days prior to the sale. According to the newspaper, the couple came to learn that an employee of the dealership had driven the car on a not approved path and lost control, sending the 458 into a chain link fence. That's what caught my attention. Remind me, chain link fence. And a porter who got fired. So the porter, person who's generally just moving cars around, was moving this car around way too fast, someplace he shouldn't have been, and a chain link fence ensued. There was reportedly no mention of this event in the paperwork sent to the couple prior to the sale of the vehicle. A lawsuit apparently alleges this was done for the purpose of covering up the negligence, defrauding plaintiffs, collecting a sales commission, collecting a tax credit, and or collecting insurance monies on the wrecked vehicle post-sale. The wreck had been deliberately concealed to close the deal. Now, of course, the dealership disagrees with this. The general manager told the paper that the car was crashed by a dealership porter who was terminated, but the manager said he believes that he was doing a good deed by offering to pay what was agreed. He said a buyer had stepped up to offer $220,000 for the car before the crash, and that the couple had agreed to it, but there's a disconnect here somewhere. After telling the couple about the accident, the manager said he didn't want to take the deal. He thought with the wreck, it gave him some leverage. I should pay him more. Now, he has a new piece of information, and he's just trying to extort more money than his original agreement. The manager said, I tried to do the right thing and continue to pay them what was agreed. Now, the couple is seeking apparently damages as high as $1 million from the dealership, alleging that the act of covering up the wreck before the sale constitutes fraud and negligence. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. And I mentioned that I had a similar case. I've talked about it on this channel before. I've written articles about it. A client of mine brought a Corvette into a dealership, and a porter took it for a drive off the lot, which they weren't supposed to do. Lost control of the vehicle, ran it over a curb, flattened a bunch of tires, and then threw a chain link fence that went up and over the car and scraped the entire surface of the car, including the convertible top. They then called the client and said, there's been a slight issue with your car. We needed it for a few more days. They were proposing to simply fix it in their body shop and give it back, probably without disclosing. But my client found out in time and a lawsuit ensued. And you might wonder now, what is going on here legally? Well, when you take something and entrust it to somebody else, it creates a legal relationship between them and your property. They don't own it, but they have lawful possession of it. So if I take something from you and run away with it, that'd be theft. If I put a gun up or a knife up, put old Betsy up, that might be robbery, armed robbery perhaps. But if I give you something with the understanding that you're going to do something with it after I've entrusted it to you, you obviously have the right to do whatever it is that I entrusted this thing to you to do with. So if I give you a car and you say, I'm going to work on this car and fix this car and give it back to you, if you take the car out and drive it, it might be part of the fixing process, right? However, if I give the car to you and say, I want you to fix the car, and during lunch, a porter gets in the car and goes for a joyride with it, that's beyond the scope of what I entrusted the thing to you for. And when someone takes something and misuses it or misappropriates it in that manner, in some states, that's a common law problem called conversion. Theft is I took it from you. Conversion is I had lawful possession of it, but I misused it and converted it to my own use. Now, I don't know if conversion is one of the things they're pleading here or if they're simply pleading fraud. But the interesting thing about conversion is it's a crime against property and or a wrong against property. In some states, it's not even a crime, but it's a civil cause of action. So in Michigan, for instance, if you convert something to your own use or your own benefit that you shouldn't have, I can sue you for that and get treble damages. The multiplying part of that statute is designed to discourage this kind of activity. And you might say, Steve, what are your damages if I took a car for a joyride and brought it back? Well, interestingly enough, under the case law in Michigan, the damages for conversion are the value of the goods at the time of the conversion. So if I take the car for a joyride without your permission or your, explicit allowal, and I bring it back, theoretically, I have committed the act of conversion, and I could be liable to you for 3 times the value of the goods. You might say, Steve, that's crazy. That's a windfall. Well, number one, the law is designed to discourage this. Number two, you could argue if the car is worth $100,000 and you converted it, you're now liable for $300,000. But when you gave the car back, you're now just liable for $200,000. And you say, Steve, that's still a crazy, crazy punishment for something so simple as just going for a joyride in a car. Well, the problem, of course, is when the joyride in the car ends up with the car going through a chain link fence with the Corvette or chain link fence with the Ferrari. What are the odds? Chain link fences and cars do not mix, especially at high speeds. So the argument here, obviously, is that when the porter took the car, the Ferrari, and wrecked it, let's assume that that's what happened, because I don't know if anybody's arguing that there was a wreck involved, and wrecked the Ferrari. The people who had possession of the Ferrari, they did rightfully possess it. They had simply misused it, or one of their agents had. They should have immediately called the owner and said, we have a problem. While we're legally in possession of your Ferrari, one of our employees wrecked it. How can we make this better for you? And instead of doing that, it appears that they instead said, well, we have a buyer. We're going to buy the car from you. Now, of course, the question is, if we have a buyer was said, and again, I don't know if those words were said, I'm simply just giving a hypothetical here. I am a dealer, and I find buyers for sellers. Some states, brokers do that. Some states, dealers do that. Some states, they can be both. But when I say I found a buyer. It implies that the buyer is someone other than myself. Otherwise, I could say, I want to buy your car. So the moment you insert something like that into this transaction, it would appear to be a problem legally for the person who did it. Now, again, I don't know the facts of this case. You'll notice I did not mention the names of any of the parties, simply because these are allegations in a lawsuit that have been reported on in a newspaper. If you want those details, they're easy enough to find. But my point simply is about the legalities of the situation. That is, you entrust your vehicle to somebody else. They are holding it in an attempt to sell it. Obviously, in that process, people might take it for a test drive. It might get moved around the property. It might get put in a showroom. It might get pulled out of a showroom. Things can happen when that stuff happens. Cars can get hit in the parking lot. Someone could take the car out for a test drive, and someone could T-bone them in an intersection who's drunk. Things happen, right? But that's not the allegation here. The allegation is here that someone took the car out and misused it, destroyed it in the process, and those damages would flow to the owner of the car. But then the question is, are we simply talking about the cost of repair? Because that wouldn't seem right. This car has been seriously devalued by being totaled. Even if you can take the car and straighten it out, it's not the same. But number two, when you're involved in a transaction with somebody, there's a thing called the obligation of good faith. And this is imposed into any transaction involving sales of goods under the Uniform Commercial Code. And the obligation of good faith is that the parties will deal with each other in good faith. Now, good faith does not mean I have to disclose to you everything I know. Hey, I know that I'm getting a really good deal here. Or I know that thing you're buying has, not got the value that you're attributing to it, whatever. But when I know that the subject vehicle's been wrecked by one of my employees, and I call you up and say, hey, I found a buyer. Most people would say, that doesn't sound like good faith to me. So from that point forward, you got issues. So I'm not sure how this will shake out. I don't know if it's $1 million case, but it's a case. So I will follow this one. I hope I see updates. But, as with so many cases, we don't get updates because these things often settle, and they often settle confidentially. But if I find out, I will tell you. So there you go. Questions, comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.